Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I am Mike Barner. He is Kirien Sprecher, and we come to you every Wednesday to give you the information that you need to win your fantasy basketball leagues. Kirien, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm happy Jokic is back in play, but let's get into it.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Nikola Jokic, let's start right off the top in that double overtime thriller between the Nuggets and Timberwolves last night. The Timberwolves won 140 to 139. Talk about fantasy gold. Now, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. were out for the Nuggets with injuries. Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo were out for the Timberwolves, serving a suspension for the altercation with the Pistons. So not only did we get double overtime, but we had short rotations, which is really good for the guys that actually played in those games. Some awesome stat lines. Nikola Jokic had a triple-double. Yeah, we expect those from him, right? Well, he also scored 61 points. So that's pretty insane. He had 6 3-pointers. He was 18 for 29 from the field, 19 for 24 from the free throw line. And for a guy with his build, he played 53 minutes. You love to see that. On the Timberwolves side of things, Anthony Edwards, 34 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 3-pointers. He played 50 minutes. He had 24 combined points in the fourth quarter and both overtime, so he really came alive. And then an unsung player here, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 26 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 blocks, 5 3-pointers over 45 minutes. Kirien, there was a lot to like about that game last night.
Yeah, you nailed it with the Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He was absolutely money off the bench for Minnesota, shorthanded Minnesota, as you mentioned. NWA finished with a plus-minus of 14. Oh, that was a team high. Josh Minute also tied him with plus 14, but Minute's plus 12 or 12 of his point differential came in the first half when Jokic was still resting. Jokic played the entire second half and the first and second overtimes. So there was obviously when Jokic is on the court, this is no matter who they play. When Jokic is on the court, the Nuggets are probably going to win those minutes. When he's off the court, that's when you got to make your hay. Minnesota did that in the first half, and they were able to do just enough in the second half to hold off the Nuggets. Anthony Edwards is absolutely fantastic. We also got to give a shout out to Julius Randle. He's been playing really well over his last 3 games, 26 points, 8 boards, 7 assists, and 1.5 stocks. He's like the X factor with this Minnesota team coming over from New York. We weren't really sure how he was going to fit. He went through some rough patches. If he's playing efficient ball next to Anthony Edwards, Minnesota is going to be a dangerous team again in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I fell asleep at the end of the third quarter. I had a bet on Anthony Edwards over 27.5 points, and I had even parlayed him to go 30-plus points with another thing. And he had 10 points at the end of the third quarter. I was like, all right, I'm going to bed. This isn't going to hit. And then when I woke up and saw he scored 34, thank you, double overtime. It's great for betting. It's great for fantasy. The only downside for fantasy is if you played against one of those guys, specifically Jokic, you're hurting today. But we've got another, Kirien, that was not the only crazy stat line from yesterday. The Warriors-Grizzlies game, Steph Curry scored 52 points in 37 minutes. He was 12 for 20 from behind the arc. He also had 10 rebounds, 8 assists, and 5 steals. He did it everywhere. Over the last 14 games, Curry has averaged 28.1 points, 5.1 3-pointers, shot 43.6% from behind the arc during that span. Great stat line for Curry. Another nice stat line from that game, Draymond Green with a triple-double. He had 13 points, 10 rebounds, 12 assists. He also chipped in 2 steals and a block. So that was great for Draymond, but Curry was the big headline last night and a big win for the Warriors.
Yeah, I think Curry likes playing with Jimmy Butler. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that. The biggest thing from this game for me, from like an entertainment perspective, obviously the stat lines are incredible, and Draymond's playing elite defense, and even with Wemby getting hurt and not qualifying for Defensive Player of the Year, people are saying maybe Draymond can throw his hat in the ring again. He's playing really well. The thing about it with Curry's performance, they needed all 52 of those points and all 12 of those 3-pointers. Sometimes we get into these games and you're trying to chuck up threes at the ends of games. Like this was they needed all of it. And I really love that when you get the great stat lines coupled with a great win. The Warriors are cooking. I still think the Grizzlies are going to be okay, but firing Taylor Jenkins was, we haven't talked about that on this show yet. I'm sure the other podcasts have, but that move was shocking to, I feel like, everybody around the NBA, and we're going to see where the Grizzlies go from here. But, scoring 130 points and still losing is a bad look after firing one of the most well-respected coaches, if not one of the best. He's well-respected around the league for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We should touch on that. It had to be John Morant wanted him out, right? I mean, all of a sudden, John Morant comes back as soon as he gets fired. There were some reports that Morant was frustrated with the offense and he didn't seem involved some nights because he didn't like the offense. This is a star-driven league. If your star player doesn't like the coach and you're in Memphis and you're not one of the top markets, that you're not the Lakers that can draw guys from anywhere, you can't let John Morant be upset because then he will ask to be traded. So that's got to be it, right?
That's what I'm hearing. I feel like Job missing all of this time is really hard on the coach too. And think about all of the injuries they had last year too. Like, yeah, you can complain about the offense, but this team hasn't been whole for like longer than a week stretch in 2 years. And they're still a playoff caliber team the last 2 years. So it's tough, but you're 100% right. If Ja said, I'm not playing, or, I'm disinterested, then you got to make the move. Like you said, you're in Memphis. If you can't risk losing a guy like Ja. But it's just a weird look. And, Morant had the off the court issues, whatever, and now he's back and he's playing well. And he was even like kind of mature this season when he was like, I'm not going to be dunking as much. And like, it felt like he was like evolving into this, and now he's trying to get his coach fired. So that kind of goes against the grain. I'm not sure, but I think you're 100% right that if Ja did go, air his grievances, you have to make a move.
Did you see, I saw some stuff floating around on social media today that John Morant did like some finger gun thing towards the Warriors heading into a timeout when they were down 7 points and the game was essentially over. I mean, what is this guy doing? What is he doing, Kirien?
I don't know. Putting up big stats when he plays. That's all I know from a fantasy perspective.
He's putting up stats. He's missing half the games and he's getting his coach fired.
Yeah, and
John Morant, he to me, his skill set, he's Derrick Rose 2.0. And the fact that he does these crazy drives to the rim, but he gets hurt a lot. And to me, he's Derrick Rose 2.0. But if he's got a bad attitude, that's a big problem. That's a big problem. And
as Bulls minute, as Rose knows, and as Bulls fans know, Rose's NBA career, I'm sure he could have been a star wherever he went. But Tibbs and surrounding him with defensive superstars, like that coach-player relationship with Rose and Tibbs was like really important for Rose's success. And obviously the injuries derailed it. So, maybe Ja can take a page out of Rose's book and, find a coach that he likes and take that next step in his career. But it just hasn't been a good couple of years for a team that had a lot of promise and still has a lot of promise.
Great job sneaking in the Bulls minute, Kirien. Great job. Now, this might have been a top stat line on a normal night. Deni Avdija had a triple-double against the Hawks last night. Not just a triple-double. He didn't just squeak one in like Draymond Green did. Avdija had 32 points, 15 rebounds, 10 assists. He had 2 steals, 3 three-pointers. That is his second triple-double since March 1st. He's averaging 16.5 points, 7.1 rebounds, 3.9 assists, and 1.7 three-pointers this season. Kirien, listen to this contract. Deni Avdija may have one of the top 5 contracts in the NBA. He has a descending salary. He will make $14.4 million next season, $13.1 million in 26-27, and $11.9 million in 27-28. Kirien, what do you make of Deni Avdija for next season?
Oh, for next season, that's a great question. I mean, when he was traded to Portland, it was like, I guess that kind of makes sense for Washington. Doesn't really make sense for Portland. I don't really know where we're going. For next season, I would have to look at the rest of the returning guys. But, with Toumani Camara stepping up and becoming one of the best defensive players in the league, Donovan Clingan getting a chance to show his getting a chance to develop at the end of this season. I like Deni Avdija. I think you have a defensive oriented team with Kamara and Klingen going into next year, and Chauncey Billups is going to, hound defense. And then you have Avdija as like one of your, you probably don't want him to be your number one option, but if he's your number two or number three, he's going to put up good stats. Obviously, in a place like Portland, we have to worry about, I like what they're doing this year, and they may be able to push for the play-in spot, but this success isn't always linear, is what I'm trying to say. So like while he's going up and while Portland's going up, there's going to be a plateau, and we can't expect Deni Avdija to average 30, 10, and 10 next year. But I think we can expect him to have a career or like match his career year next season. Does that make sense? Like I think he's solidified himself as a strong fantasy player, but I'm not going to be drafting him in the top 50 next year.
I think we got to hope that the Trailblazers take anything for Jeremy Grant and just trade him. Avdija has really taken off with Grant out recently. That's been a big boost for him. So hopefully we can get the Trailblazers to move on from Mr. February. Maybe they can trade him for 2 second-round picks and a different bad contract because Mr. February is not helping the Trailblazers one bit. All right, let's move on.
Before we move on, we got to mention DeAndre Ayton is still getting paid $35 million next year. So that puts a big X mark on a lot of what Portland wants to do, moving off of that contract and Jeremy Grant's contract. That's $70 million between those two players for guys that you probably don't want to be playing very much.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. All right, now we got to talk about, we've avoided injuries for a while. That's been pretty good. But we can't avoid it forever. Karl-Anthony Towns did not play yesterday against the 76ers with a knee injury. Mitchell Robinson stepped into the starting five, 14 points, 14 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal, despite playing just 21 minutes. So a great stat line for him if you streamed him or used him in DFS. Now, the Knicks also play tonight against the Cavaliers. Probably just a rest situation for Cat against a bad team, right, Kirien?
Yeah, I think that's what we got going on here. Obviously Jalen Brunson is still out, so that kind of limits the Knicks' upside as to how high they can jump in the standings, right? They're not going to catch anybody. Like the Celtics are essentially locked into the 2 seed. They've won 9 in a row, so maybe they're making a push for the 1 seed. But right now, the standings are Cavs, 4 games back are the Celtics, 8 games back are the Knicks, and then 4 games back of the Knicks are the Pacers. So I think the Knicks are sitting in third, and they're just like, let's get Brunson, let's get Cat, let's get all of these guys who played heavy minutes, let's get them fully healthy for the playoffs. And it sucks from a fantasy perspective because Cat has been super healthy this year and hasn't really needed many rest days. So if you're in, the last week of your rotisserie league or, you're in a points league championship, this is a huge blow, but it shouldn't mar the great season that Cat had this year.
Some good news on the injury front for the Dallas Mavericks. They are finally starting to look pretty healthy here down the stretch. Daniel Gafford started and played 19 minutes against the Nets on Monday. He had 17 points and 7 rebounds. Anthony Davis is obviously back. He's probable for tonight's game. And Derek Lively could return as early as this week. He is listed as questionable for tonight's game against the Hawks. Kai Jones was kind of fun there for a little while. He's a drop right now if you were streaming him and got something out. Maybe the smaller lineups are no more. Maybe not so many minutes for Najee Marshall. But good news for the Mavericks here, Kirien, who probably are looking like they're on pace there to get into that play-in tournament.
Yep, absolutely. I think they will get that first play-in game, that 9-10 matchup. And I think they could win that one, depending on who they play. If it's the Kings, maybe Phoenix, maybe Portland. The Suns continue to reel, and I don't really think Beal's return is going to help much. So I think Dallas will get that one of the play-in games. Maybe they win. I feel like it'll probably be a coin flip in that 9-10 matchup. But then advancing, I don't see them beating, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, the T-Wolves, or the Clippers in the second round. So, yes, they're getting healthy. Yes, maybe we can see, what the Luka-less Mavericks look like for the future, right? But I don't expect them to actually get into the real playoffs.
One team that is set to make the real playoffs is the Detroit Pistons, but Cade Cunningham is doubtful for tonight's game against the Thunder. That will be his 5th straight missed game. Now, Pistons are locked in pretty much to a playoff spot here. They're not going to fall into the play-in tournament, so they're probably just being cautious with Cade. From a fantasy perspective, Dennis Schroeder has started the last 4 games, averaged 12.8 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 8 assists. If you're looking for streamers, if you're playing DFS, not only is Cade Cunningham out tonight, but Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, and Marcus Sasser are all serving their suspensions from that altercation with the Timberwolves. So not a great matchup against the Thunder, but without a lot of bodies available, maybe Dennis Schroeder, Tobias Harris, they're still worth deploying in fantasy, right, Kirien?
Yeah, absolutely. But you kind of put the perfect caveat on this. Like it is the Thunder, so maybe it turns into a blowout really quick. And just like we were talking about Cat and the Knicks, the Pistons are essentially locked into their play-in spot. Not locked in. I shouldn't say that. They're not going to get a home court advantage in the first round, right? So they're locked into playing on the road in the first round. So at that point, it's like, who do you really want to play? And you probably don't want to play the Celtics. You probably would rather play the Knicks, right? So dropping into like maybe. I don't know if they're not going to drop out into the play-in game, right? They're 6 games out of the play-in spot, so maybe they drop to that 6th seed or something. Then I feel like they're not trying to play too many games. They're just like, hey, we're going to be on the road in the first round anyways. We're not going to fall into the play-in tournament. If Cade is healthy, we have a chance against maybe anyone. If he's not healthy, we don't have a chance. So let's just get him healthy. Again, sucks from a fantasy perspective, but I don't think Cade's injury is like they're super worried about it. It's just maintenance right now. Yeah,
agreed. And finally here, let's talk about Bradley Beal, who might be close to making his return here for the Suns. He did participate in shoot-around Tuesday, but did not play against the Bucks. With Kevin Durant out for at least 1 week, the Suns really need Beal if they're going to have any hope of making the play-in tournament here. Now, over his previous 10 games, Beal has averaged 17.1 points, 3 rebounds, 4.1 assists, and 1.7 three-pointers. The Suns' next game is Friday against the Celtics, so there's a little bit of time here. Kirien, do you have any faith in Bradley Beal down the stretch?
Well, you just said his averages, and you failed to leave out that included a scoreless game, a 4-point game, and a 30-point game.
That's right.
And a game with 11 assists. So, like, do I have faith? I don't want to have to trust Bradley Beal, but if you have him, you're probably going to have to throw him out there. Like you said, with Kevin Durant out, he's going to get usage. So if you have him, you just got to play him and hope he plays 40 minutes and scores 20-plus points, which he's very capable of doing, but also very capable of dropping duds as we've seen this year.
Yeah, he's basically a coin flip. That he could be great or he could be terrible. And waiver wire options are thin right now in leagues where people are still fighting for a championship because there's so many guys that are out for the season that people have dropped them. Like CJ McCollum, guys like that have been dropped. Cam Johnson's probably been dropped because he's hurt. So a lot of those guys have been dropped and other guys have been picked up. Our favorites like Isaiah Collier and Malik Beasley. Those guys aren't as readily available in so many leagues. So you just got to cross your fingers and hope you can get somewhere with Bradley Beal. So because we're here down the stretch and some of you have already finished up your leagues or maybe you're in the last week of the league right now, we're going to go back in the time machine and talk about some guys that we were right about and wrong about. It's not all sunshine and rainbows here on the Wednesday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. So we're going to tell you where we were wrong too. But before we do that, a word from our friends at Rebet. March Madness is here. And if you're looking for a way to get in the game, it's time to check out Rebet, the ultimate social sportsbook and casino platform. With over 100 leagues on the sportsbook and 25-plus 24/7 live dealer casino games, we are striving to give users an experience they haven't had elsewhere. All March long, Rebet is rolling out daily promos, making it the ultimate month of exciting offers for their fans. Right now, for a limited time, Rebet is matching your first purchase up to $100 in Rebet Cash when you use promo code RotoWire. Download Rebet today on the App Store or Google Play, enter code RotoWire, and start playing with your promo funds. It's time to play, predict, and experience the madness only on Rebet. Thank you to our good friends at Rebet for sponsoring the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. All right, now let's talk about some guys that we were right about and some guys that we were wrong about this season. Kirien, let's get the negative right out of the way. Tell us one guy that you were wrong about this season.
All right. Well, I think in this job that we have, very lucky to have this type of job. But we got to be held accountable, right? Like you said, it's not all sunshines and daisies. We make mistakes and we got to own up to that. And my biggest mistake this past fantasy basketball season was Keyonte George. Keyonte George basically finished right around his ADP, so it wasn't like he was a major bust, slightly higher in points league, but I was expecting a major leap, and I was dead wrong. I was drafting Keyonte George at pick 100 in every league that I possibly could. He was ADP around 120, and I thought this guy was going to be a top 50 guy. I thought the field goal percentage, the turnovers, those were going to be there, but I thought he was going to score a bunch of points. He was going to make a bunch of threes. The assists were going to be there. He was going to be like the one shining or one bright thing out of Utah this season. That just didn't come true. Even with all of the injuries, resting, whatever you want to call it, George never really took control of this offense. Even lost the starting job to Isaiah Collier, who has been awesome in fantasy for us. You look at his overall season, and George saw he went to the bench. He's had some good performances off the bench, but it's just not consistent. George saw slight increases in his counting stats overall, but his shooting efficiency and turnovers remained the biggest problem. He's never going to be an ideal category player. I still probably am a little interested in him next year, but I'm definitely going to be taking him closer to his ADP next year and not reaching for him around pick 100, because there was a lot more valuable players around those picks, as we'll probably get into as this segment continues. But the thing is in categories, I was just looking at threes and assists, and that's what really came to fruition for George for me. And I was like, this is the guy. I want him. He just never took control. And in fantasy, you kind of have to have some things go right. And it just seemed like everything was going against him this season.
Well, Collier surpassing him on the depth chart was a very big surprise. I mean, anybody going into the season wouldn't have thought that Collier would surpass Keyonte George on the depth chart, which is what he did. The logic was sound, Kirien. I liked it. He would have been good for silly season, but Isaiah Collier came out of nowhere. And then now, who I was wrong on, man, I drafted this guy everywhere I could. I was so excited. I was shouting from the rooftops, Andre Drummond. I figured, Andre Drummond was great for the Bulls last season. He only averaged 17 minutes a game, but he still had 8.4 points, 9 rebounds, and just under a steal a game. He is now the main backup for Joel Embiid, who is always hurt. When Joel Embiid gets hurt, Andre Drummond is going to be a star. He's being drafted outside the top 100. This is a slam dunk. Well, I was half right. Joel Embiid played 19 games, and he was always hurt. However, I was dead wrong on Andre Drummond. He got surpassed by Yabusele on the depth chart. Drummond only played in 40 games. When he did play, he only averaged 19 minutes a game, 7.3 points, 7.8 rebounds. He hasn't played in forever because the 76ers are tanking. Andre Drummond, wah, wah. Sorry, guys. I missed on that one.
Your rationale was totally sound to me, and I agreed with it. And I partially agreed with it because it's look, free throw percentage, a big man, it's just going to be hard to find a big man around after pick 100 that makes free throws, right? That's whatever. You're just going to cross that off. That's all big man thing. You got the blocks and the defensive stats and the rebounds and the field goal percentage. I was like, Joel Embiid will miss games. That will be enough to make him a solid play, maybe not a spectacular play, but he was really only a one-trick pony because he didn't block a lot of shots. He didn't get a lot of steals, and he honestly wasn't very efficient for a big man. So it was only the rebounds. I think this is the rationale, the reasoning behind it was all right. We just didn't get the performance out of the veteran Drummond that we were hoping to. And maybe if Jared McCain stayed healthy and Pinky P was actually productive and they were a better team, we would have seen a little more production out of Andre Drummond. But I think that also played a factor. They were just so bad that as a big man, it's pretty easy to get disinterested when your team is that bad.
Yeah. All right. Now, Kirien, talk about someone you were right about. Let's hear the good side.
All right. I mean, look, second Bulls minute, all hail King Tibbs. Look, if you drafted as many Knicks as possible in fantasy, you're probably doing pretty well. We both advocated for that earlier this season. I know you're going to mention another Knick, but Cat was arguably the biggest beneficiary of the minutes load. You're going to talk about Josh Hart too, but Cat was a top 5 guy, top 3 guy in fantasy this season, whether it's points, categories, whatever. And I said all offseason that when Cat last played with Tibbs, he averaged over 35 minutes per game and was a perennial top 5 fantasy producer. Well, Cat got 35 minutes and is currently 4th in 8 category value. Even playing with Jalen Brunson, who's hurt right now, Cat was able to increase his scoring for the first time in 3 years, but the biggest difference was his rebounding. 12.8 rebounds per game is currently a career high for the big fella, and the last time he grabbed more than 12 rebounds was, wait for it, when Tibbs was his coach. So this was like the perfect storm for Cat. Yes, you could kind of say that going from Anthony Edwards to Jalen Brunson, one high usage player to another high usage player, but we have to also mention that Brunson played with Luka before, right? So he's used to playing with superstars. Ant never really had that. This was perfect storm for Cat. I could see it coming, and I was surprised that he wasn't like a top 15, top 10 ADP. He was going late second round, early third round. So if you were able to take him in that range and get top 5 value for him, you're probably doing pretty well in your league.
Yeah, great call on Cat there, Kirien. Like you mentioned there, my guy, Josh Hart. Man, Josh Hart, he was going outside the top 100 when we talked about him originally on the show. I believe his ADP finished up around 92, so he did sneak inside just the top 100. But he's been a top 20 player in fantasy basketball. He's averaging just under 14, 9.6 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.1 pointers. The big thing, he's shooting a career-high 53 points. Giving you all those counting stats. He's doing it in an efficient way. And oh, yeah, he's played in 72 games and averaged 38 minutes. Thank you, Tibbs. Josh Hart has been the man. I hope as many of you drafted him as possible. Kirien and I did.
I don't think there is a player who had a bigger ADP difference. Like you're talking like an 80 ADP, that's kind of a tongue twister, but like a huge difference, 90, 80 points or draft pick difference for his ADP between his actual value. I think Hart is probably the MVP or like, the most valuable. Is it the best player or is it the most valuable? I think based on where we drafted Josh Hart was the most valuable player in fantasy. I feel like Austin Reeves could maybe get his hat in that ring. But that I drafted Josh Hart in did pretty well.
Dyson Daniels too. True.
Yes.
Undrafted in a lot of leagues.
100%. That's totally fair. My second hit was Tyler Herro. Look, I feel like Tyler Herro has been fantasy gold when he's healthy in his career, and everybody knows this. The problem is before this season, he'd miss at least like a 2-week stretch in each of his first 5 seasons that kind of like plummeted his fantasy value or, turned fantasy managers off. Last season, he played in a career low 42 games. And I feel like that really impacted his ADP. He was still available at like the end of the 6th round in a lot of my drafts. But for some reason we were drafting LaMelo in the early or like late first, early second. To me, like Tyler Herro and LaMelo are kind of the same player. I think LaMelo has a higher upside, but the biggest thing is they're both injured. So drafting LaMelo at the end of the first, I was never going to do that, but I would definitely draft Tyler Herro at the end of the 5th, if that makes sense. Even if Herro missed 2 or 3 weeks this season, he would have still been probably right at his ADP, right? He probably would have been a top 50, 60 player, but he didn't miss too much time. And we got lucky with the Jimmy Butler situation. And now Herro is a top 15 guy. So like, I feel like my rationale would sound like even if the worst things happen, he's still going to be pretty valuable at that pick. And then if things go out the right way, he could be insanely valuable. I don't expect him to be available at the end of the 5th round or 6th round moving forward. But I feel like this was the perfect storm where a guy who has a history of fantasy success got knocked down because of one bad season and maybe a history of injuries, and then had his best season ever. And this was like the perfect time to draft Tyler Herro.
Yeah, great call on Tyler Herro. I am going to finish up this segment with the guy that I was right about. Our guy, one of our friends of the podcast here, even though he doesn't probably know that we even exist, although he should.
Hey, if we talk
Norman Powell.
If we talk smack about Pinky P, I'm sure Norman Powell knows we exist.
Maybe. That's right. It might have been on his radar. But Norman Powell is one of my top late-round targets. Came through with averages of 22.6 points, 3.1 three-pointers, and 1.3 steals per game. Not much in the way of rebounds or assists, but that's not why we drafted him. But he did shoot 49% from the field, 81.4% from the free throw line. So he provided not only scoring, but efficient scoring. Now, the downside, he did miss some time with injuries, most notably the last few weeks when some of us were probably in the early rounds of our fantasy playoffs. But still, he's got a shot to play 60 games this season. Guy that was drafted outside the top 100, providing that scoring average. If you get 60 games out of him, that's a huge win. Norm Powell, thank you, Norm. We're glad you're healthy now. If you're in the fantasy championships and you had Norm, he's back. He's played at least 30 minutes the last couple games. But Norm Powell, great job, Norm. We appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, 100% right. He is still outperforming his ADP by a lot, even with the missed time. And if he didn't miss time, he would have easily been on that list with, Reeves and Dyson Daniels and Josh Hart as one of, a guy that was outside the top 120 being a top 50, top 40 guy. Fantastic season for Norm Powell. One of my favorite stats of the entire season was like the biggest differences the biggest increases in scoring from last year to this year. And like, it's all like, this guy's 20, 21, 22, Norman Powell, 34. like that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We spend so much time trying to predict what's going to happen. And sometimes a guy like Norman Powell just goes off and only Mike Barner, RotoWire expert, has that information available for you. Before we move on, I just want to say like, Jalen Johnson, Paolo Banchero, these were other guys that I was considering, but they kind of got hurt and that kind of impacted their season. And then we talked about Avdija earlier, but I didn't include any like mid-season acquisitions. This was more like what we were going to or what we wanted from at the beginning of the season. So like Quentin Grimes, Amon Thompson, Isaiah Collier, Deni Avdija, you were all over a lot of those guys. So even if you don't get it right at the beginning of the season, there's plenty of opportunities to get your season corrected as we went along.
Yeah, we did have some nice waiver wire additions throughout the season. I also was considering putting Austin Reeves on this list. He did pretty well for me. Jalen Johnson, man, that injury, I lost 2 leagues because he went down. I know it's tough to say, well, it's one player, you had time up for it, but you can't make up for the production that Jalen Johnson was providing.
He was a first round value like before he got hurt. He was. I had him and Nikola Jokic on a points league, and Jalen Johnson was like going toe to toe with him like on a weekly basis, game by game basis for how many points he was putting up. But this is one of those things that's back to back seasons with Johnson. He had the injuries in college too, so he's probably not going to be a guy that's going to be drafted in the top 50 just because of those reasons alone.
I'll take him. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If I'll take him over LaMelo Ball, at least the Hawks are going to be competitive.
Yeah.
At least they'll be competitive.
Totally.
I can't trust the Hornets. I don't know what's going to happen. The only good thing with the Hornets is at least Miles Bridges is still playing. I mean, if you drafted LaMelo Ball, that's you're out. Mark Williams, he's been hit or miss, resting some days. As bad as they've been and the resting stuff that they've done, at least Miles Bridges is still playing. So if a lot of like the guys on the Raptors, they're tanking. They've done terrible. Guys on the Wizards, things are hurting them. But at least if you rostered Miles Bridges, he's still worth something.
For sure.
All right, now it's almost time for the best segment in all of the podcasting universe. We've only got one more episode after this today, guys. So make sure you get Uncle Bob and Aunt Janet and Cousin Irene. Get them all in the room because there's only a couple of these left. Now, we don't have a lot of questions in the chat because a lot of you are probably holding your trophies right now, and you don't have any questions. But our guy, Aaron Van Buren, has some questions here, and we want to help Aaron because he's one of our loyal listeners. So, Kirien, go ahead. Let's try and help Aaron here.
All right. Well, before we get too far, congrats on drafting Cat and Hart. I'm sure you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
He has 3 moves left. Thursday is my last weekday. Any 3 guys you recommend specifically for Thursday's game? And he's interested about Dorian Finney-Smith. Yeah, I mean, Finney-Smith had that one big game. recently. I think there was a lot of injuries during that game. I'm just looking at the Thursday schedule, and I see the 76ers, Washington, Portland, Toronto, and Brooklyn. That's a lot of resting, tanking opportunities. So I'm sure we're probably just going to have to wait to see the injury report to see who's actually playing in those games, because there's going to be some value there. Do you have anything on this?
Yeah, like Justin Edwards, if he's available, Bona from the 76ers there too, if you need a big man. Johnson from the Wizards, AJ Johnson from the Wizards, another guy to consider. Keon Johnson maybe of the Nets, if he's still out there. There's just like you said, Kirien, the injury reports are going to be key on that day. It's tough to add somebody now. Maybe see what the injury report looks like this afternoon. Maybe if you're listening to this later, for those of you that are listening to the podcast, wherever you get your podcast episodes, thank you for listening. But maybe we'll get some of those injury reports for tomorrow's games this afternoon.
What are your thoughts on Lonnie Walker? He's kind of been – he started the last 2 games. He's put up some points and assists. Quentin Grimes has also kind of been resting, so maybe if Grimes gets ruled out, I like Lonnie Walker a little bit. But yeah, I think you just monitor the injury report, and you find a couple guys you like, and you flip a coin or roll a dice or do something, because we're in silly season right now. But I do think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for some waiver wire guys to make an impact tomorrow because of the tanking teams that are playing right now or playing that day.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you, Aaron, for being a loyal listener of the podcast here. And thank you to everyone else out there listening and watching on YouTube TV. And now it's time for the What Was That stat lines of the week. Kirien, you are up first.
All right, so I want a little basic. We already talked about it earlier in the show, but just the historical aspect of Jokic's triple-double last night. He's the third time in NBA history that a triple-double was accompanied by 60 points. Just a fantastic performance. I'm in a points league with Jokic, and the playoffs are, 4 teams make the playoffs, and it's two weeks, sections. So I lost the semifinal matchup because Jokic just didn't play. Now he's back, and I'm doing really well in the third place game. I think I'm going to do fine as long as Jokic keeps playing. So happy to have my number 1 pick back. And then obviously Steph, last night we talked about the 12 made threes. Steph has the most 50-point games in NBA history since turning 30. It's true what the old man at the Y says. The shot never goes away. You may lose some athleticism. You may lose some quickness, but that shot never goes away.
Love it. Now, Kirien went positive. We love the positive. We've only got 2 of these left, so I have to get some stuff off my chest. My wife doesn't want to hear me argue. In May when I'm complaining about something, I have no outlet. So let's get it out of the way now. Fred VanVleet on March 27th played the Utah Jazz. This team with the second worst defensive rating in the league. They have been mailing it in since Christmas. They opened up their presents, and then they put everybody on the shelf. They haven't cared since the end of December. Fred VanVleet played 34 minutes. He scored 4 points. What was that? 4 points. He shot 1 of 10 from the field. How on earth does Fred VanVleet score 4 points over 34 minutes? He has been terrible down the stretch. He's shooting 25.4% from the field and 25% from behind the arc over the last 5 games. A very disappointing season for him, averaging 14.3 points. He's shooting 37.9% from the field for the season. That's terrible, Fred. 0.6 assists per game average, lowest mark since the 2018-19 season. Ben Thompson is ascending. To see Fred VanVleet end up on another team for him to reach his fantasy basketball peak again. But Fred VanVleet, 4 points over 34 minutes against the Jazz. What was that? That was terrible, Fred. Come on, look in the mirror. Jeez.
Yeah, from a fantasy perspective, you nailed it. He's not going to be the fantasy player he was with this team. They have a bunch of young guns ready to step up. But I do think he's going to need to hit some shots in the playoffs if this team is going to get to where they want to go. currently the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. So they want to go pretty far, and they're going to need Fred VanVleet. I feel like he's been on the, what was that stat line of the week, negative multiple times this year. So we're sorry, Fred.
Well, when you're shooting 37.9% from the field, you're going to end up on the list. Become more efficient. Get yourself off the list, Fred. Game, shoot 40%. 40.
Totally
Give
fair.
us 40.
Totally fair.
Jeez.
All right,
and with that is the end of today. Oh, go ahead. You got something, Kirien.
I got one quick thing. Quickly, guys, I don't have a big social media following. So if you want to follow me at Kirien Sprecher, RotoWire, Twitter, Blue Sky, X, whatever. I have a terrible social media following. My bosses want me to have a bigger social media following. So if you have any basketball related questions, playoffs, betting, fantasy, whatever, you just at me and I'll try to respond to you, try to grow that social media following a little bit. We got 300 people live watching this right now. We don't do this often, asking you to, support us or support the show, like and subscribe, do all that good stuff. But it really does help us out. And I just want to take a quick second here and give us both a shout out. Also follow Mike. He posts all of his betting stuff, all of it. And he does a lot. He's all over the social media game. So just wanted to give us a quick shout out as the season comes to a close. And thank you guys for tuning in all season.
And don't forget, head on over to rotowire.com/pod for our paywall. We are still churning out content. Our Roto leagues still going. This is the championship week in some leagues. Next Wednesday is going to be Kirien and I's last show of the season. I want to see victory laps in the chat. Come to the chat. Bring the victory laps. Tell us how many championships you won, how much cash you won, cold hard cash. What are you going to spend it on? You can both tell us that in the chat, and you can reach out to us on those social media platforms. Just message. Shoot us a message. Shoot us a reply. Go into our DMs, and we'll talk about it. We want Victory Lap Wednesday next week, so bring it all to the show. And with that, may your players stay healthy for this final stretch of the season, and you bring home those championships. Thank you, everyone.